Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Driftwood Ranch. I'm Randy Ray, the Literate Texan, and this video is about the books I want to read in May. This is my TBR video for May, to be read. TBR is an acronym for to be read. So, I have 12 books on my TBR this month. This is probably extremely ambitious because some of these books are reasonably long. But I'm just going to go through them really quick, tell you what I know about the books, and you'll know what I'm going to be up to the rest of the month. Okay, so the only event that I'm participating in May is Horror Mayhem. And I've already done a video about what I'm planning to read about Horror Mayhem. I'm not going to comment much more on the books in this video than I already have, but I am reading Harlan Ellison's Shatterday, which I am told most of Ellison's work is actually horror adjacent, but it's a book of short stories. Harlan Ellison doesn't tend to turn me down. One of these days, I'm going to make a video about the letter that Harlan Ellison wrote me on Christmas Day in 1988, but I'm going to save that for another video because it is only tangentially related to my TBR video. The next book on my list for May is Robert Aickman's Go Back at Once. I've mentioned this in one of my other videos, but I'm working my way through Steve Donohue's list of the top 10 fantasy and science fiction books of 2023, and this is on the list. So I'm looking forward to reading it. Robert Aickman was a favorite of my mother's, and I've liked his writing in the past. I have no reason to expect not to like this book too. I also have on my TBR About Schmidt, which was a movie that I liked very much. And it's by Louis Begley. Yes, I did look at the cover to see who the author was because I don't have it memorized. And I didn't realize this when I saw the movie, but About Schmidt is the first book in a series of books about Schmidt. So if I like this one, I'll have several more to read. Next on my May 2023 to be read list is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. And I watched a video this morning from Criminology, and he mentioned that he was planning to read The Princess Bride this month. I am familiar with William Goldman for things other than The Princess Bride, William Goldman, the first thing I ever read by William Goldman was a memoir about his experiences as a screenwriter in Hollywood. He wrote the screenplay to Misery, which is a Stephen King novel, adapted into a movie by Rob Reiner. It's terrific. He also wrote the screenplay to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which is another of my favorite films. I love Robert Redford, and I love Paul Newman. And I believe they only had 2 collaborations, that and a movie called The Sting, which I'm planning to rewatch soon too. But I've read The Princess Bride once before. I liked it very much. It goes into much more detail in both the framing story of the grandfather reading the book to his grandson, and also there's a little more adventure in the fairy tale aspect of the book too. I don't remember any of the details. I just remember that's what happened in the book. So I'm really looking forward to that too. And here's a biggie for us. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which I'm told works equally as well as a fantasy as it does historical fiction and vice versa. And my good friend Amos, who teaches creative writing at UNT, not only did he recommend this to me, he gifted me this book. Yeah, this was a present for me. So I'm looking forward to digging into that. I've been hearing about this next book on my TBR for years. I've had it for quite a while. It's called Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Most people watching my channel are interested in books enough to have already heard of this. It's historical fiction, and it has got an insane list of praise on the back of it. Won the National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction, among other things. But it is largely about Henry VIII, Anne Boleyn, and I believe the main character is Thomas Cromwell. I'm in the middle of this one right now, or I say I'm in the middle of it. I'm 138 pages in. This was also from Steve Donahue's list of the best fantasy and science fiction of the year 2022. It's called Last Exit. It is by Max Gladstone. Max Gladstone co-wrote a novel called This Is How You Lose the Time War. I did not like that book. Last Exit, so far, can't put it down. Absolutely love it. It's terrific. If this is an example of what I'm going to be reading on Steve Donahue's list of the best fantasy and science fiction books of 2022, well, count me in, man, because this is terrific. Absolutely love it. I'm also going to read Cinema Speculation by Quentin Tarantino. These are his thoughts on some of the movies that he grew up on. He's always got interesting things to say about movies. Another reread on my list is The Weird Sisters, which is by Eleanor Brown, who I understand is something of a romance novelist. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But The Weird Sisters is about three women whose father is a Shakespeare professor. The Weird Sisters, of course, being a reference to Macbeth. And I remember enjoying this when I read it 10 years ago, but I was still engaged in my drug and alcohol problems at that time, so I don't really have strong recollections of the book other than it was really good. So I'm looking forward to dipping my toe back into these waters. Also for Horror Mayhem, I have The Ghouls, which is an anthology of short stories that had been turned into horror movies. This came out, I think, in 1970, 1971. Vincent Price wrote an introduction. Christopher Lee wrote an afterword for this book. So obviously it was quite a long time ago. My mom had this book. I remember liking it when I was growing up, and I'm looking forward to dipping back into it. It has some cool short stories in it. Many of them are in the public domain now too. That's also part of my Horror Mayhem reading project, because again, it's a collection of short stories, and one of the things that they're focusing on in Horror Mayhem this month, I understand, is shorter works. And next to last, this is the penultimate book on my list, The Horror Stories of Robert E. Howard. And there's a massive amount of material in here. I'm really looking forward to reading this. I think Robert E. Howard is one of the most energetic writers from the Weird Tales era. Not only did he create Conan the Barbarian, but he created Solomon Kane. And Pigeons from Hell is considered one of the best classic horror short stories of all time. I'm also planning to read Everything's Eventual by Stephen King, and I have a digital copy of that. I'm not exactly sure where I left my Kindle. I just had it a minute ago. But anyway, most people have seen the cover to that. It's 14 short stories by Stephen King. I remember liking it the first time that I read it, although I couldn't tell you specifically anything about any of the short stories in it. But I will be able to by the end of the month, if I get that far in my TBR. But that's 12 books for May that I plan to read. Thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment. Let me know about some of the stuff that you're reading in May, or any of the reading projects that you're going to engage in May, especially if you're going to engage in Horror Mayhem. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in.